So VN, you are also an avid mountaineer. You've been high altitude mountaineer. Um, and mountaineering, such especially the high altitude mountaineering in Himalayas, is also can potentially be risky endeavor. So is there any example you can remember or can tell us where both biases or decision making impacted? Yes.
Well, yeah, interestingly, you say this. So my first experience um, of a significant high altitude high trek, and actually I'm not a mountaineer because mountaineering involves very much of technical climbing.
Right.
I am a trekker really. So as long as it's a gently sloping or even steeply sloping, I can manage it, but technical climbing is beyond me. So I was undertaking what I subsequently learned was one of probably the toughest trek in the Garhwal and Kumaon Himalayas.
Sure.
I didn't know it was that tough, but I thought I was physically ready. And we were doing the crossing of what is called the Kalindi Pass, which is at about 19,500 feet.
Okay.
So 5 days into the trek, we arrived at high altitude meadow called Nandanvan. And I made very heavy weather of the climb from Tapovan. You come down to Gangotri Glacier, you cross the Gangotri Glacier, and then you climb up a steep slope to Nandanvan. It was very tough. And I realized that I was not physically prepared for it. If this is what I was struggling with at 15,000 feet, how would I ever do 19,000 feet?
Sure.
So I thought through it through the night. And the next morning, which was a rest day at Nandanvan, I told my expedition leader that I have to call it off. And a lot of people persuaded me, said, no, you can make it, you can do it, etc., etc. But I called it off. And that was a very, very big disappointment.
Okay.
But subsequently, I have thought that perhaps I was a bit risk averse. Perhaps my judgment of my capability was somewhat flawed. But on the other hand, I also think to myself, what if I had not made an error? Right? What would have been the cost of that risk?
That's true.
Right? So that was one story. And the other one involves a bunch of my students from IIM Ahmedabad. So many years ago, one of the girls from my class, the PGB executive batch of IIM Ahmedabad, she wrote to me an email saying that she and some of her batchmates at the end of the course had gone on a trek. I don't remember where they went. I think they were trekking to Kumari Pass, which I suspect is at about 15,000 feet or 14,500 feet. And at about 11 or 12,000 feet, the weather changed for the worse. They had gone very early in the season. It was March. And it began to snow heavily the night they were in their tents. And it snowed incessantly for 2 or 3 days. This is generally unusual at 11 or 12,000 feet. But this girl wrote to me saying that they sat down one evening in the tent, and all of them were, at least some of them were my members of my class on strategic thinking and decision making. And they said they relived the particular class in which I taught Daniel Kahneman's prospect theory, where he talks about judgment under uncertainty of risk. And they decided that they would abort the trek. And they came back. So I can only say that those students, those youngsters, were wise because they had their whole lives ahead of them. Right? And a bad mistake could be very expensive.
Fantastic example.
And it is not as if they were expert trekkers.
Climbers, yes.
Yeah.
Right. But I guess the examples you gave was, on one hand, there's Kennedy, who is also a president of high caliber. There are presidents like Khrushchev, and also there are amateurs. So I guess it's really applicable across the range. This whole bias is affecting and perhaps mitigating that